better lock in for this one. We're talking about trades in the NBA. Or not exactly trades, but how trades work. There are a lot of rules when it comes to trades in the NBA. You can't just trade any player for any number of players you want. A lot of factors influence what moves a team can make. One of the biggest factors is timing. When can a team make a trade? A player can't just be traded any time of the year. I'm sure you've heard of the trade deadline. That's the final day a team can make a trade for the season. It's when the teams have to lock in their roster. It happens a little bit after, halfway through the season, right before the All-Star break. Typically, it's the first week of February. This year, it was the 6th of February at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. Trades have to be submitted to the NBA office by that time. This year, Jimmy Butler, Kyle Kuzma, Brandon Ingram, they were all traded on the day of the deadline. This is usually a pretty exciting time of the year. Not just because players are moving to new teams and wearing new jerseys, and not just because trade demands we've been talking about for months finally get resolved, but we actually get to find out what direction teams are going in. We see what teams are actually trying to win a championship that year. Like when the Warriors traded for Jimmy Butler. They gave up this year's pick for Jimmy Butler, and then they extended Jimmy for 2 more seasons. Basically saying, forget our future. We're either going to win this year or next year, or we're not winning for a long time. On the other hand, you have teams like the Hornets and the Wizards. Both were terrible and clearly out of playoff contention. So they said, hey, let us take on your bad contracts. We'll take them. We don't care. They ended up with guys like Jusuf, Nurkic, and Khris Middleton, guys who weren't worth their paychecks. And in return, they received future draft picks. But when can teams start making trades again? They can start trading as soon as their season ends. The losers are allowed to trade with each other. The most confusing aspect of trades in the NBA is salary matching. You can't trade any player for any player. The salaries of the players have to be roughly the same amount. Now here's the thing, if a team is under the luxury tax line, they can kind of make whatever trade they want. If their player is making under $7.5 million, they can trade for a player that's making twice that. Or if they want to trade one of their players that's making over $29 million, they can make a trade for a guy that's making 125% of that player's salary. I know, it sounds complicated, but this is what you have to understand, is that teams that are under the luxury tax line have more flexibility. And it's because they're not spending that much money. Think if the salary cap is meant to punish big spenders, why would you punish someone that didn't do anything wrong? Now, usually, teams that are not in the luxury tax aren't particularly good teams. Usually. And since they can take back more salary than they give out, they become, like the Charlotte Hornets, a dumping ground for bad contracts. Here's an example. In the 2019 finals, Klay Thompson got hurt. The Warriors wanted to find a replacement for Klay Thompson for the following year. They were working on a sign and trade for D'Angelo Russell from the Brooklyn Nets. The problem was, the Warriors were so far over the salary cap, they couldn't make the trade work. So they had to shed some payroll. They called up Memphis, who were under the tax line. They basically said, hey, can you take Andre Iguodala's contract from us? If we dump his $17 million onto you, we can sign D'Angelo Russell. The Grizzlies said, sure, we're rebuilding. We don't care. We'll take his salary. But they added, hey, but you need to give us something if we're going to take on Andre Iguodala's old ass. No disrespect to Iggy. He was just old. So the Warriors said, fine, take our 2024 first round pick. Iguodala became a Grizzly, but he never went to training camp. I think he was hurt that the Warriors traded him and he didn't want to play for the Grizzlies. The Grizzlies didn't care that he didn't show up though. They didn't make the trade for Iguodala. They made the trade for that first round pick. So if your team is over the luxury tax line, it becomes harder to make trades. But the NBA really doesn't want teams to go super far over the luxury tax, so they made 2 more thresholds. One is the first apron at $196 million, and the other is the second apron at $207 million. And there are punishments for exceeding these thresholds. It is extremely hard to make trades if you're over either of these thresholds. Teams over the first apron can't take back a salary that's more than what they're giving out. The NBA is basically saying you're not going any further over the salary cap, man. You've got to trade out salaries that are more than what you're bringing back. Hey, I know it's confusing, so here's an example. Remember when Damian Lillard was traded? The Bucks were over the first apron at the time. They wanted Dame, so they traded Drew Holiday and Grayson Allen. Drew and Grayson's salaries together added up to $45.8 million. Dame's incoming salary was $45.6 million. Basically exactly the same, but not exactly the same. Dame's salary was 99.9% of the outgoing salary. But if Drew Holiday or Grayson Allen were making $1 million less, or Dame was making $1 million more, the trade would have been illegal because the Bucks would have been taking back more salary than they were sending out. Make sense? You following this? Take a second. Now, I'm sure you've heard about the second apron. The second apron is the NBA saying to a team, you spent too much money. This is out of control. They're not hard capping a team, but they're saying you can't spend any more money. Next year, Boston, Cleveland, and Phoenix are expected to be over the second apron. So these teams will not be adding much to their roster. Let's go over what type of trades they can't make. Obviously, they can't trade out players and get back more salaries than they sent out. So let's say the Celtics want to trade Drew Holiday and Sam Hauser. And let's say they want Ja Morant. This is hypothetical. Ja is making $30 million next year. Hauser and Drew's salaries together together are $42 million. Seems like it works, right? Boston's taking back less money. This'll do. But nope, this trade doesn't work because the Celtics are over the second apron. And the thing about being over the second apron is you can't trade 2 players for 1 player. I think this rule exists to keep teams from trading their entire bench for a single superstar player. The league does not want teams spending hundreds of millions of dollars racking up max contracts. Honestly, I think this rule was made specifically for Matt Ishbia. The league doesn't want to watch him wreck his franchise and torch money any longer. I really think they just stepped in and made a rule. So all the trades I've mentioned so far are simultaneous trades. But there is a less common type of trade called a non-simultaneous trade. Now, what is a non-simultaneous trade? A non-simultaneous trade is when a single player is traded to another team, and the team trading that player does not get anything back, or they don't get any players back. Instead, they might get draft picks or possibly cash consideration. Cash considerations just mean straight up money. Sometimes trades are a little bit lopsided, so one team will just throw in a couple bucks and call it even. The Nets traded Joe Harris to the Pistons, along with 2 second-round picks. What did the Nets get back? Just cash consideration. Literally, just a briefcase full of $110,000. That's the smallest thing you can trade, because you can't trade a guy just for nothing. You can't just dump a guy's salary. The Nets just didn't want to pay Joe Harris that $19 million they owed, because they were in the luxury tax, and that $19 million actually came out the $40 million of expenses. They weren't trying to hit the repeater tax either, not after trading KD and Kyrie. They were rebuilding. They wanted to clear out some cap space for the summer as well, so they could sign their guy Cam Johnson to a $94 million deal. Also, Joe Harris unfortunately had fallen out of the rotation. He wasn't really relevant on the team anymore. But the real reason the Nets traded away Joe Harris was for the main reason teams do non-simultaneous trades. They wanted a traded player exception. So what exactly is a trade exception or a traded player exception? I'm sure you've heard it come up every offseason and not known what the anyone was talking about. It's the result of a non-simultaneous trade. A team trades away a player and does not get a player back, and they're over the salary cap, so that's a big problem because they can't sign a free agent to replace the player, and now that salary they had is gone. They can't use that salary for a different trade, but they get a traded player exception that's worth the value of the player's salary plus $250,000. That trade exception lets them go over the salary cap by that amount of money, meaning they can now receive a player without having to trade a player and go over the salary cap by that trade exception amount. I know you need an example. So technically, the Boston Celtics traded Gordon Hayward to the Charlotte Hornets. They did not get a player back. They got some weird second-round pick arrangement. Gordon Hayward's salary was $28 million. So the Celtics got a trade exception around $28 million. Later, they used it to trade for Evan Fournier. They were over the cap, so they couldn't sign a free agent, so they were lucky to get Evan Fournier. They didn't use the full $28 million. Evan Fournier's contract was only for $17 million. The Magic gave Boston Fournier, and all Boston had to give back was like a second-round pick. So if you wonder why this is called a non-simultaneous trade, it's because one of the parties is going to get their compensation later. But the team has only 1 year to get that compensation because the trade exception expires after 1 year. If the Celtics hadn't found that Evan Fournier deal, they would have lost Gordon Hayward for nothing. They would have just done the Charlotte Hornets a favor. Now, I know this is really confusing. I'm going to put the definitions in the descriptions. You should read them. You should read them a lot. You should go back and look at old trades and see what happened. You can also play around with the NBA trade machines. If you have an idea for a trade, you can plug it in there and it'll tell you if it's legit or not. All right, thank you for being here. If you understood all that, God bless you. I did my best, man. If you got other questions, leave comments. I'll reply in the comments and I'll answer your questions for you. How about that? Check out the Patreon. Leave a comment, leave suggestions. You know the deal. Be good to your mammies. Eat a corn dog.